A new report from fintech firm Chime shows that the 70% of working Americans subject to traditional pay cycle, 43% report having missed out on events, purchases, or services in the past 6 months due to financial delay. Joining us now to break down the findings and how consumers can navigate paycheck cycles is Chime's spending officer, Janelle Sallenave. Janelle, great to have you here on this. So first and foremost here, just walk us through this finding here. Of those 70% and the percentage that are missing out on payments here, how can we kind of turn that tide, turn the ship the other way?
Absolutely. Happy Friday. And for many of us, happy payday. We at Chime have been for years and years thinking about how to build products and services that give everyday Americans greater control and flexibility over their finances. And what we had begun to see in our internal data, more than 7 million members that we work with, was that the traditional pay cycle just wasn't keeping pace with the realities of modern life. And so we did this research to really dig deeper into it. And as you mentioned, we are seeing many Americans across all generations, all demographics, who are being forced to miss out on important experiences and even essential services. As you mentioned, more than 40% of Americans have reported that they've needed to miss out on something important. That could be an event with a friend, a family gathering, taking a pet to the vet, because they were waiting for their paycheck. And 60% of Americans expect to face similar challenges in the next 6 months. It's quite pervasive. We call this FTMO, or forced to miss out, because that really is what it is. It represents not just the fear of missing out, we all know FOMO, but it's the reality of being forced to miss out and having to really pick and choose between those purchases.
Can you talk about how the different generations, how this impacts them, where millennials are experiencing FTMO versus perhaps Gen Zers who are a little earlier in their careers as well?
It's a great question, because so much research, and I'm sure, Brad, you see this in all the work you do, is that there are nuances and differences between generations. But what has really been fascinating in this research is that every generation is experiencing this the same way. Gen Z experiences this as often as millennials. I'll use myself as an example. I confess I'm not Gen Z, but in my personal life, I last week had to make the decision to buy my son a new soccer uniform, because as every parent knows, these kids keep growing, and he had outgrown it. We had hoped to get a second year out of it. And so it really is more about our lifestyles. It may show up in different types of purchases for different generations, or different segments of the American population. But we just see a pervasive need for all of us to, in essence, have to make those hard decisions about where we're going to be forced to miss out. And what's, I think, important for all of us to know is that the traditional 2-week pay cycle has been in place for 80 years. And if we think about how we spend our money, gosh, it looks a lot different than how we had our finances working 80 years ago. And so we really have this very antiquated way of getting paid, and it's hitting all of us.
Is there a better, real way of getting paid here? I mean, it seems like, and we've discussed this with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau as well, where we're just trying to get a sense of what is the best way to make sure that there is that relationship between company and employee, and having a payment schedule that doesn't off-route or put off so many major life events because you just didn't have it in that pay period.
Right. It's a great point. It's not a new problem, as you've mentioned, and we've all been solving it for decades in our own ways, borrowing from friends and family, sometimes needing to do a payday loan. More than 45% of Americans reported in this recent research having to use a credit card to avoid missing out on something in the last 6 months. And at Chime, we think there's got to be a better way, and we do believe that there are better ways than having to make these hard choices.